teasing, defiant looks, and arguments over anything and everything. That's how their story had always played out, until fate placed them in the same place at the exact right time, and nothing was ever the same again. Because sometimes love hides where you least expect it, until it becomes impossible to ignore. The buzzer rang at precisely 7 in the evening, and Eleanor Ashford already knew who it was. She closed her eyes, counted to 3, and reminded herself that assault was in fact illegal. "You cannot be serious," she muttered, hobbling from her couch to the intercom. Her worn slippers shuffled against the hardwood floor of her modest London flat, a cozy space filled with bookshelves, mismatched cushions, and the faint scent of the lavender candles she favored. She pressed the button. "Whatever you're selling, I'm not buying." "Open the door, Eleanor. I have something that belongs to you." That voice, deep, commanding, infuriatingly smooth. Sebastian Clark spoke as though the world existed solely to accommodate his wishes. And the worst part was, it usually did. She buzzed him up, because apparently she had no self-preservation instincts whatsoever. When she opened the door, there he stood, 6 feet 2 inches of tailored arrogance. His charcoal suit probably cost more than her monthly rent. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass, and his grey eyes held that perpetual look of mild amusement that made her want to throw things at his impossibly handsome face. He held up a worn paperback. "You lent this to Charlotte 8 months ago. She asked me to return it." Eleanor snatched the book from his hand. "This is a library book. I returned it ages ago. This isn't even mine." Sebastian didn't miss a beat. Then perhaps Charlotte was mistaken. "Regardless, I've done my brotherly duty." He didn't move from her doorway. Instead, his gaze swept over her, the oversized cardigan, the messy bun, the reading glasses perched on her nose. Something flickered in his expression, gone before she could name it. If this story is touching your heart, show your support, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Every action helps us keep bringing you new stories full of emotion. "Well?" She crossed her arms. "Was there something else, or do you simply enjoy looming in doorways like some sort of designer-clad gargoyle?" His lips twitched. Almost a smile, but Sebastian Clark didn't smile. He smirked. He brooded. He delivered cutting remarks with surgical precision, but genuine smiles were apparently beneath him. "I wanted to ensure you're not filling my sister's head with more of your ridiculous advice," he said, leaning against the doorframe as though he owned it. "She mentioned you encouraged her to give that musician another chance." "James isn't just a musician. He's a composer, and he loves her. Unlike some people, I believe in second chances." How charmingly naive. Eleanor felt her blood pressure rising. This was their dance, had been for the 3 years since Charlotte had introduced them. Sebastian would appear with increasingly flimsy excuses. They would exchange verbal barbs sharp enough to draw blood, and then he would leave. She would spend the rest of the night replaying every word, every glance, hating herself for noticing the way his eyes crinkled slightly when she landed a particularly good insult. Not that she noticed such things. She absolutely did not. "Charlotte is a grown woman," Eleanor said firmly. "She doesn't need you hovering over her love life like some overprotective medieval lord. Someone has to protect her from her own romantic delusions." His voice carried an edge now, something darker beneath the polished surface. "Not everyone gets a fairy tale ending, Eleanor. Some of us learned that lesson young." The words hung between them, unexpectedly heavy. For a moment, his mask slipped, revealing something raw underneath. Then it was gone, replaced by that infuriating composure. Eleanor found herself leaning forward, curiosity overriding irritation. "Sebastian, I should go." He straightened abruptly. "Try not to corrupt my sister further while I'm away. I'll be traveling for business, so you'll have 3 blissful weeks without my interference. However, will I survive the disappointment?" There it was again. That almost smile. "Good night, Eleanor." He turned and walked away, and she definitely did not watch him go, did not notice the breadth of his shoulders or the confident stride that suggested a man who had never doubted himself a day in his life. She closed the door and pressed her forehead against it, groaning. Charlotte Clark was her closest friend, her confidant, her partner in crime for over a decade. Charlotte was warm, generous, and wonderfully chaotic. How she shared genetic material with that impossible man remained one of life's great mysteries. Her phone buzzed. Charlotte's name lit up the screen. "Did my brother just leave your flat?" Eleanor sighed. "He returned a book that wasn't mine." Again, a pause. Then Charlotte's voice, knowing and amused. "He's returned things to you 11 times this year. That's almost once a month. Your point?" "My point is that Sebastian Clark, who runs a billion-pound investment firm and hasn't taken a personal day in 6 years, keeps finding excuses to show up at your door. To annoy me, it's his hobby." Charlotte's laugh was delighted. "Oh, Ellie, for someone so brilliant, you really can be remarkably blind." Before Eleanor could demand an explanation, Charlotte had already changed subjects, chattering excitedly about her upcoming trip with James, 3 weeks at a countryside retreat, reconnecting and rebuilding what they'd almost lost. Eleanor listened, happy for her friend, pushing aside the uncomfortable flutter in her chest whenever her mind drifted back to grey eyes and almost smiles. She didn't hate Sebastian Clark. That was the problem. She was terrified that she felt something far more dangerous instead. 3 days later, Charlotte stood in Eleanor's flat with 2 enormous suitcases and a smile bright enough to power half of London. "You're absolutely certain you'll be fine?" Charlotte asked for the 7th time, checking her phone for James's message that he'd arrived downstairs. Eleanor waved her hand dismissively. "Go. Be disgustingly happy with your composer. Send me pictures of countryside sheep or whatever one does at romantic retreats." Charlotte pulled her into a fierce hug. 3 weeks. Try not to burn down the city while I'm gone. No promises. After Charlotte left, Eleanor's flat felt unnaturally quiet. She told herself she appreciated the silence. She had work to catch up on, books to read, a life that absolutely did not feel emptier without her best friend's constant presence. And certainly not without random visits from Charlotte's infuriating brother. The following Tuesday, Eleanor attended her company's quarterly gala at the Victoria Grand Hotel. As a senior editor at Pemberton Publishing, attendance was mandatory. She'd chosen her outfit carefully. An elegant burgundy dress that swept to her ankles, vintage pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother, sensible heels she could actually walk in. She spent the evening making pleasant conversation, dodging her over-eager colleague Timothy, who had been trying to ask her to dinner for 6 months, and counting down the minutes until she could escape. It happened at 10:30. She was descending the marble staircase, mind already on her warm bed and the novel waiting on her nightstand, when her heel caught on the edge of a step. Time slowed. She felt herself falling, grasped desperately for the railing, missed. The world tilted sickeningly. Then pain, white-hot and blinding, exploded through her ankle as she crumpled at the bottom of the stairs. The next hours blurred into a nightmare of ambulances, bright hospital lights, and concerned faces speaking in medical terminology. Fractured ankle, ligament damage. Surgery might be necessary. Definitely immobilization. Weeks of recovery. Eleanor lay in her hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, willing herself not to cry. She was 38 years old. She had handled worse than a broken ankle. She would manage. But when the nurse asked for emergency contacts and Eleanor realized she had no one to call, her parents retired in Portugal, Charlotte unreachable at some countryside paradise, no siblings, no partner, something cracked inside her. She gave the hospital Charlotte's number anyway, knowing her friend would never forgive her if she didn't at least try. Charlotte's phone went to voicemail. Of course it did. She was probably walking through meadows with James, completely disconnected from technology. Eleanor left a carefully cheerful message, minimizing everything, insisting Charlotte not cut her trip short. What she didn't know was that Charlotte, despite her romantic retreat, checked her messages each night. When she heard Eleanor's voice, that forced brightness that couldn't quite mask the pain underneath, she immediately called the one person she knew would drop everything. Sebastian was in his office at Clark Investments when his phone rang. He'd been staring at the same quarterly report for an hour, accomplishing nothing, his mind inexplicably returning to a pair of warm brown eyes and a sharp tongue that matched his own. "Sebastian!" Charlotte's voice was tight with worry. "It's Eleanor, she's in hospital." The world stopped. What happened? His voice came out harsher than intended. "She fell, broke her ankle. She left me this message trying to sound fine, but I could hear, 'She's alone, Seb. She has no one there, and I'm hours away, and James already checked. There are no flights until morning. Which hospital? He was already standing, grabbing his coat, his car keys. St. Mary's, but Sebastian, you don't have to. He hung up. The drive took 23 minutes. He made it in 15, his heart pounding against his ribs in a rhythm that felt dangerously close to panic. Eleanor was hurt. Eleanor was alone. Eleanor needed someone, and that someone was going to be him, whether she liked it or not. When he strode into her hospital room, the sight of her nearly brought him to his knees. She looked small in the hospital bed, fragile. Her dark hair was tangled, mascara smudged beneath eyes that glistened with tears she was clearly fighting. Her ankle was wrapped, elevated, surrounded by ice packs. She turned at the sound of his entrance, and her expression shifted from pain to utter confusion. "Sebastian, what on earth? You're coming home with me." The words came out before he could stop them. His voice was rough, stripped of its usual polish. What? No, I'm perfectly capable." He crossed to her bed in 3 strides, his hands gripping the rails so tightly his knuckles went white. Up close he could see every evidence of her suffering, the pallor of her cheeks, the tight lines around her mouth, the vulnerability she was desperately trying to hide. Something inside him shattered. "You have no family in London. Charlotte is unreachable. You cannot care for yourself in this condition." He leaned closer, his eyes burning into hers. "I am Charlotte's brother. You are her closest friend. This makes you my responsibility. I don't need—" "This is not a negotiation, Eleanor." His voice dropped, fierce and final. "You're coming to my penthouse. You're staying until you can walk without assistance, and I will not hear another word of argument." She stared at him, something shifting in her expression. He couldn't tell if she wanted to slap him or thank him. Truthfully, neither could she. "Fine," she whispered, too exhausted to fight. 1 week. Sebastian didn't tell her that 1 week would never be enough. He didn't tell her that seeing her in that hospital bed had clarified something he'd been denying for 3 long years. He simply made the arrangements, called his driver, and prepared to bring home the woman he absolutely was not falling in love with. Sebastian Clarke's penthouse was exactly what Eleanor had expected, and somehow still managed to leave her speechless. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Thames, the London skyline glittering like scattered diamonds against the night sky. The space was enormous, decorated in shades of grey and navy, all clean lines and expensive minimalism. It looked like something from an architectural magazine, beautiful, impressive, and utterly devoid of warmth. "It's very you," Eleanor observed from her wheelchair, as Sebastian pushed her through the marble foyer. "I'll choose to take that as a compliment." "You would." He made a sound that might have been a laugh, quickly suppressed. "The guest room is down this corridor. I've had it prepared for your extended stay." 1 week, she reminded him. "We'll see." Before she could argue, he'd positioned the wheelchair beside the bed and was reaching for her. Eleanor's breath caught as his arms slid beneath her, one behind her back, one under her knees, and lifted her as though she weighed nothing at all. "Sebastian, I can manage." "You cannot." He laid her gently on the bed, his face inches from hers. This close, she could see the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw, catch the subtle scent of his cologne, something woody and expensive that made her head swim. "Stop fighting me on everything. Fighting you is my primary source of entertainment." His grey eyes met hers and something electric passed between them. His gaze dropped to her lips for half a heartbeat before he straightened abruptly. "Rest. I'll bring your medication in an hour." He was gone before she could respond, closing the door with a soft click. Eleanor stared at the ceiling, her heart hammering traitorously. This was a terrible idea. 3 years of carefully maintained distance, of sharp words and sharper glances, of pretending that Sebastian Clarke was nothing more than her best friend's insufferable brother. All of it threatened to crumble, simply because he'd carried her with hands that trembled slightly, looked at her with eyes that held something far softer than disdain. She pressed her palms against her burning cheeks. 1 week. She could survive 1 week. Sebastian stood in his kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter, forcing himself to breathe. She was here, in his home, in his guest room, wearing a hospital gown beneath his spare robe because her dress had been ruined in the fall. Her hair smelled like vanilla and something floral, and when he'd held her, she'd fit against his chest, like she was designed to be there. This was a catastrophically bad idea. He'd spent 3 years constructing elaborate excuses to see her, returning books that weren't hers, delivering messages Charlotte could have texted, appearing at her door with complaints about advice she'd given his sister. Each time he told himself it would be the last. Each time he'd leave craving her sharp tongue and knowing eyes like a man dying of thirst. And now she was living under his roof, vulnerable and dependent on him, and he was absolutely not equipped to handle the feelings crashing through his carefully ordered existence. His phone buzzed. "Charlotte. How is she? Tell me honestly." He typed back, "Settled in the guest room. Complaining already. She'll be fine. Thank you, Seb. I know you two don't exactly get along, but..." He stared at the message, a bitter laugh escaping him. "Don't mention it." Theos Babasima, and the first morning, established a pattern that would become their strange new normal. Sebastian appeared at 7 with tea, toast, and her prescribed pain medication arranged on a tray with the precision of a military operation. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms that Eleanor absolutely did not notice. "You made breakfast," she said, failing to hide her surprise. "Don't sound so shocked. I'm not entirely useless in a kitchen. Could have fooled me. I assumed you had servants for everything." "I have a housekeeper who comes 3 times a week, Mrs. Patterson. She's been informed of your presence and has already started clucking about that poor dear and planning menus." He set the tray across her lap. "Apparently you need feeding up. I've never met her and she's already judging my weight. She's 73 and believes everyone under 50 is too thin. You'll like her." He paused at the door. "I have calls this morning, but I'll check on you at noon. Don't try to get up without assistance." "Yes, Your Majesty." His lips twitched. "Brat." He left, and Eleanor found herself smiling into her tea like an absolute fool. By day 3, the routine was established. Sebastian as unlikely nursemaid, Eleanor as reluctant patient. He brought meals at precise intervals, helped her to the bathroom with clinical efficiency that somehow still made her blush, and sat with her in the evenings while she watched television programs he pretended to find idiotic. "This is absurd," he commented, gesturing at the screen where 2 contestants were arguing over cake decorations. "How is this entertainment? It's comforting, mindless. Not everything needs to be intellectually stimulating, Sebastian." Clearly. But he didn't leave. He stayed beside her on the sofa, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, and made sarcastic commentary until she was laughing so hard her ankle throbbed. "Stop," she gasped, wiping her eyes. "It hurts to laugh." His expression shifted instantly, concern replacing amusement. "Do you need more medication? I can call the doctor." "Sebastian." She touched his arm without thinking, and they both froze. "I'm fine. It's a good hurt." He looked at her hand on his forearm, then at her face. Something naked and wanting flickered through his eyes before he shuttered it away. "You should sleep," he said roughly. "It's late." He carried her to bed again, and this time, when he laid her down, his hand lingered on her cheek for just a moment. "Good night, Eleanor." "Good night, Sebastian." She dreamed of grey eyes and almost touches, and woke aching in ways that had nothing to do with her ankle. The worst part, she decided on day 5, was how impossibly good he was at caring for her. He anticipated her needs before she voiced them. Extra pillows appeared when her back ached. Her favorite books materialized from her flat, retrieved by his driver. He learned how she took her tea, strong, with too much sugar, and never commented on her terrible habits. And yet the sarcasm remained, the verbal sparring that felt more like foreplay than fighting. "You're hovering," she accused one afternoon, as he adjusted her ice pack for the 3rd time in an hour. "I'm ensuring proper healing. You're driving me mad." His smile was slow, dangerous. "Good. Now we're even." She threw a pillow at his head. He caught it easily, laughter crinkling the corners of his eyes. For one shining moment he looked almost happy. Eleanor tucked that image away like a precious secret, knowing she'd never be able to forget it. On the 7th day, the doctor came to examine Eleanor's ankle and declared she was healing beautifully. Physiotherapy would begin soon, gentle exercises at first, gradually increasing in intensity. "I actually know someone," Eleanor mentioned casually that evening, scrolling through her phone. "Daniel from my office. He's a trained physiotherapist. Did it before he moved into publishing. He offered to help when he heard about the accident. Sebastian went very still. Daniel, he repeated, the name sounding like something unpleasant on his tongue. He's lovely. Very gentle hands, apparently. His wife raves about the massages he gives her. She glanced up, catching something dark flash across Sebastian's face. What? Nothing. He stood abruptly. That won't be necessary. I've already arranged for a physiotherapist. You've... When? I only just mentioned needing one. I anticipated the requirement. He was moving toward his study, his shoulders rigid. Dr. Margaret Chen, highly recommended. She'll start tomorrow. Eleanor frowned at his retreating back. Sebastian, Daniel offered to do it for free, as a friend. There's no need to spend... It's handled. The study door closed with unnecessary force. She stared at the door, utterly bewildered. What Eleanor didn't know, what Sebastian would rather die than admit, was that the moment she'd said Daniel with that casual warmth, mentioned his gentle hands, his vision had gone slightly red. The thought of another man touching her leg, sliding hands along her calf, holding her thigh during exercises, hearing her gasp in pain, watching her face as she struggled through movements. Absolutely not. He'd contacted 6 different physiotherapy practices before finding Dr. Margaret Chen. 62 years old, impeccable credentials, maternal demeanor, and most importantly, completely uninterested in anything beyond Eleanor's ankle rehabilitation. The cost was triple the normal rate for home visits. Sebastian didn't care. He would have paid 10 times as much to ensure that no Daniel with gentle hands came anywhere near her. This is professional concern, he told himself as he transferred the payment. She's Charlotte's friend. I'm protecting my sister's interests. Even he didn't believe it. Dr. Chen arrived the next morning, a no-nonsense woman with silver hair and kind eyes. She assessed Eleanor thoroughly, designed a treatment plan, and began the first session while Sebastian hovered in the doorway. Mr. Clark, Dr. Chen didn't look up from Eleanor's ankle. I work better without an audience. I'm simply ensuring... Out! Eleanor bit her lip to keep from laughing. Sebastian looked like he'd been slapped with a fish. I'll be in my study, he managed, and retreated with what dignity he could salvage. The moment he was gone, Dr. Chen smiled conspiratorially. He hired me with very specific instructions. No male assistants, no male colleagues covering sessions, only me, personally, every single time. Eleanor's heart did something complicated. He's just protective of his sister's friends. Dr. Chen's expression suggested she wasn't fooled for a moment. Now let's begin. This will be uncomfortable at first, but you'll thank me later. The sessions were, as promised, uncomfortable. Eleanor gritted her teeth through stretches and exercises, determined not to show weakness. But sometimes the pain spiked unexpectedly, and despite her best efforts, small sounds escaped her. Sebastian appeared in the doorway within seconds every single time. Everything all right? Fine, Eleanor would gasp. Perhaps we should stop. Mr. Clark, Dr. Chen's patience was remarkable. If you interrupt one more time, I will ban you from this floor entirely. He retreated, but Eleanor could see him pacing in the corridor, unable to go far. Something warm and terrifying bloomed in her chest. Taistum Charafeti, your brother is being strange, Eleanor told Charlotte during their video call that evening. Charlotte's face on the screen was sun-kissed and relaxed, the countryside retreat clearly working its magic. Strange how? He hired a physiotherapist before I even asked for one. He practically growled when I mentioned my colleague Daniel could help. He hovers constantly, like he's afraid I'll shatter if he looks away. Charlotte's smile was knowing. And how does that make you feel? Confused, annoyed, like I'm missing something obvious. Ellie. Charlotte leaned closer to the camera. My brother doesn't hover. My brother doesn't care for people. He writes checks and maintains polite distance. The fact that he's personally bringing you tea and hiring physiotherapists and growling at the mention of other men... She paused meaningfully. What do you think that means? Eleanor's mouth went dry. He's just being responsible. Because you're away. Keep telling yourself that, darling. That night, the pain was worse. Eleanor had pushed too hard in her session, determined to heal faster, to stop being a burden. Now she paid the price. lying awake at 2 in the morning, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. She wouldn't call for Sebastian, she wouldn't. But he appeared anyway, as though he'd sensed her distress through walls and floors. He stood in her doorway, rumpled from sleep, wearing a t-shirt and pajama bottoms that made him look startlingly human. Eleanor. Her name was soft, worried. Why didn't you call me? I'm fine. You're crying. He crossed to her bed, sat on the edge, and did something that stopped her heart entirely. He took her hand. His thumb stroked across her knuckles, gentle as a whisper. His other hand reached up, brushing tears from her cheeks with devastating tenderness. You don't have to be strong every moment, he murmured. Not here, not with me. She looked at him, really looked, and saw something she'd never allowed herself to see before. Beneath the arrogance, beneath the designer armor and cutting wit, was a man who was terrified. Terrified of caring, terrified of needing, terrified of whatever was growing between them in the quiet hours of this strange cohabitation. Sebastian, she whispered. Don't. His voice cracked slightly. Don't say anything. Just let me stay. Until you sleep. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. He shifted, settling against the headboard beside her. Her head found his shoulder as naturally as breathing. His fingers continued their gentle rhythm through her hair, and slowly, impossibly, the pain receded. She slept. He stayed awake until dawn, memorizing the weight of her against him, knowing that everything had changed, and there was no going back. Neither of them mentioned the night Sebastian held her hand until she slept. They resumed their careful dance of sarcasm and stolen glances, pretending the walls between them hadn't developed significant cracks. But something had shifted. Sebastian's touches lingered a half-second longer. Eleanor caught herself leaning toward him when he entered a room. The air between them felt charged, waiting for a spark. 2 weeks into her stay, the spark arrived in the form of Timothy Bradford. Eleanor heard the buzzer and Sebastian's clipped voice through the intercom. She was settled on the living room sofa, her ankle propped on cushions, enjoying her first afternoon without Dr. Chen's cheerful torture. There's someone here for you, Sebastian said, appearing in the doorway. His expression was carefully blank. A colleague. Timothy. Oh no. Timothy appeared behind Sebastian, clutching an enormous bouquet of roses and wearing his most earnest smile. He was perfectly pleasant. Sandy hair, kind eyes, the sort of dependable attractiveness that probably appealed to sensible women. Eleanor had never been particularly sensible. Eleanor! Timothy rushed forward, nearly tripping over the coffee table in his enthusiasm. I was so worried when I heard. I've been trying to visit for days, but the office said you were staying somewhere private, and I had to practically interrogate Janet in accounting to get this address. Timothy. Eleanor accepted the flowers awkwardly. This is unexpected. I couldn't let you suffer alone. He sat beside her on the sofa, too close, she noticed Sebastian notice, and took her hand. How are you feeling? Do you need anything? I could bring you those pastries you like from that cafe near the office, or perhaps she has everything she needs. Sebastian's voice could have frozen the Thames. Timothy blinked, seeming to notice him for the first time. I'm sorry, and you are? The owner of this flat. Sebastian moved into the room with the predatory grace of a man who knew exactly how intimidating he was. Eleanor is recovering here under my care. Your care? Timothy's confusion was almost comical. I didn't realize Eleanor had that you were... He's my best friend's brother, Eleanor said quickly. Charlotte is traveling, so Sebastian offered to help. Very generous. Timothy's tone suggested he found it somewhat suspicious. I'm a generous man. Sebastian's tone suggested he was considering throwing Timothy off the balcony. The tension was suffocating. Eleanor searched desperately for a way to diffuse it. These flowers are lovely, Timothy. Very thoughtful. His face brightened. I remembered you said you loved roses at the Christmas party when we were talking by the punch bowl. You were wearing that green dress and you mentioned... Yes, well. Sebastian plucked the bouquet from Eleanor's hands. These need water, immediately, before they wilt and make a mess. He strode toward the kitchen, handling the roses like they'd personally offended him. Timothy watched him go with bewilderment. Is he always so... intense? Unfortunately, yes. Eleanor. Timothy leaned closer, his voice dropping. I know this might not be the perfect time, but I've been meaning to ask. Once you're recovered, perhaps we could have dinner. Properly, I mean. Not as colleagues. Before Eleanor could formulate a response, Sebastian reappeared. "I'm afraid Eleanor needs her rest." His hand landed on Timothy's shoulder, not quite a threat, but definitely not friendly. "The doctor was very clear about limiting visitors." "But I only just arrived." "And now you're leaving." Sebastian steered him toward the door with implacable determination. "Thank you for the flowers. I'm sure Eleanor appreciates the gesture. I'll show you out." Eleanor watched, torn between mortification and something that felt treacherously like satisfaction. The front door closed with pointed finality. Sebastian's footsteps returned, each one deliberate and measured. "That was rude," Eleanor said, though her heart wasn't in the scolding. "That was necessary." He stood before her, arms crossed, jaw tight. "The man was practically drooling on my sofa." "Your sofa? I thought I was a guest, not a prisoner." "You're unwell. You need rest. Not lovesick puppies cluttering up your recovery with their ridiculous roses." Eleanor's temper flared. "Timothy is a friend." He was being kind. "Timothy wants significantly more than friendship, and you know it." "So, what if he does?" She struggled to sit up straighter, wincing at the movement. "What business is it of yours who visits me or what they want?" Sebastian's composure cracked. His eyes blazed with something wild and desperate. "It's my business because what?" He made a frustrated sound, raking his hand through his hair. "Because I can't stand it. Watching him look at you. Touch your hand. Talk about Christmas parties and green dresses like he has any right to remember such things." Eleanor's breath caught. "Sebastian, I don't want him here." The words came out raw, almost angry. "I don't want any of them here. Anti-man who thinks he can just waltz in with flowers and take you to dinner and—" "Take me from what?" Her voice shook. "I'm not yours, Sebastian. You don't get to decide who I see or who I have dinner with." The words hit him like a physical blow. Something shuttered in his expression. "You're right." His voice went cold, controlled. "Forgive me. I overstepped." He turned and walked away. Moments later, she heard his study door slam. Eleanor sat in the aftermath, trembling. Her ankle throbbed. Her heart throbbed worse. What had just happened? She replayed his words, the anguish in his voice. "I can't stand it, watching him look at you." Oh, God. Charlotte's knowing smile, Dr. Chen's amused observations, Sebastian's constant proximity, his irrational jealousy over a colleague, his desperate hiring of a female physiotherapist. The truth she'd been avoiding crashed over her like a wave. Sebastian Clark, arrogant, impossible, infuriating Sebastian Clark, had feelings for her. Real feelings. The kind that made a man act irrationally and say things he couldn't take back. And she had just told him she wasn't his, when she was beginning to suspect she'd been his all along. Eleanor buried her face in her hands and wondered how everything had become so impossibly complicated. Sebastian didn't emerge from his study for dinner. Mrs. Patterson brought Eleanor a tray with sympathetic clucking and meaningful glances toward the closed door. "He's always been like this," the housekeeper confided, settling into the armchair across from Eleanor. "Even as a boy after his mother left. Builds walls so high even he forgets what's on the other side." Eleanor paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. "His mother left?" Mrs. Patterson's face softened with old sorrow. "When he was 12 and Miss Charlotte was 8. Just vanished one day. Left a note saying she wasn't meant for motherhood. Their father never recovered. God rest him." Eleanor's chest ached. She thought of Sebastian at 12, serious, proud, suddenly responsible, learning that love meant abandonment, that needing someone gave them power to destroy you. No wonder he kept everyone at arm's length. "He's different with you," Mrs. Patterson continued, her eyes knowing. "I've worked for him 7 years, never seen him care for anyone like this. Fussing over tea temperatures and extra pillows, calling me at midnight to ask if chicken soup helps with pain medication nausea." "He called you at midnight?" "3 times, the housekeeper smiled. "He's terrified, that one. Terrified of what he feels, but feeling it anyway." After Mrs. Patterson left, Eleanor sat in the darkness, watching the city lights glitter beyond the windows. The roses Timothy had brought sat in a vase on the side table, beautiful and somehow accusatory. She didn't want roses from Timothy. She wanted— The study door opened. Sebastian stood silhouetted against the light behind him, looking utterly wrecked. His tie was gone, shirt untucked, hair disheveled from running his hands through it repeatedly. "I'm sorry." His voice was hoarse. "I had no right. You're correct. You're not mine. You don't owe me explanations about visitors or flowers or dinner invitations. I behaved abominably." "Sebastian." "Please." He moved closer, stopping at the edge of the sofa. "Let me finish. Because if I don't say this now, I'll lose my nerve entirely." She nodded, heart pounding. He sat beside her, careful not to jostle her ankle. In the dim light, he looked younger somehow, vulnerable in a way she'd never witnessed. "I don't know when it started," he said quietly. "Perhaps that first day, when Charlotte introduced us and you told me my tie was pretentious. No one speaks to me that way. Everyone else either wants something from me or fears me. But you just saw me, and decided I was worth mocking anyway." A watery laugh escaped her. "It was a pretentious tie. It was designer Italian silk. My point exactly." His smile was brief, pained. "I made excuses to see you. For 3 years, Eleanor. Every ridiculous pretext I could invent. Returning books, delivering messages, complaining about advice you'd given Charlotte. I told myself it was nothing, that I simply enjoyed the verbal sparring. And now?" He turned to face her fully, his grey eyes luminous in the darkness. "Now you're living in my home and I bring you tea every morning, and I know exactly how you take it. Too much sugar, which is frankly appalling. And I held your hand while you cried, and I wanted to throw that insipid man out my window for bringing you flowers. Timothy is harmless. Timothy looked at you like you were something precious." Sebastian's voice dropped. "And I couldn't bear it. Because that's how I look at you. When you're not watching, when I think I can get away with it." Eleanor forgot how to breathe. "I don't know what this is," he continued roughly. "I don't trust it. Everything I've ever loved has left me. My mother. My father, eventually, though he waited until Charlotte and I were grown. I learned very young that caring for people gives them weapons to wound you. I wouldn't—" "I know." He reached out, his hand hovering near her cheek without quite touching. "That's what frightens me most. I believe you wouldn't. And that belief feels like standing at the edge of a cliff." She caught his hand, pressed it against her cheek. His breath hitched. "I've been lying to myself too," she whispered. "For years. Telling myself I hated you because the alternative was too terrifying. And now? Now I'm in your home, wearing your spare robes, letting you bring me tea with too much sugar." She turned her face, pressed her lips to his palm. He shuddered. "And I don't think I've ever felt less like hating you." He leaned closer. She could feel his breath on her lips, see the rapid pulse in his throat. His hand slid from her cheek to the back of her neck, fingers tangling in her hair. Eleanor. Her name was a prayer and a warning. She tilted her face up, wanting, waiting. His phone shattered the moment with its shrill ring. Sebastian jerked back, a curse escaping him. He glanced at the screen. "It's Charlotte. Video call." "Of course it was," he answered, and Charlotte's cheerful face filled the screen. "Hello, you two. I wanted to check on— Why do you both look like you've seen a ghost?" "It's late," Sebastian said, his voice remarkably steady. "We're tired. You're sitting very close together for 2 people who supposedly hate each other." Eleanor leaned into frame, hoping her flushed cheeks weren't visible. "We're conserving body heat. Your brother keeps this flat at Arctic temperatures." "Lies. He runs warm." Charlotte's grin was knowing. "Well, don't let me interrupt whatever I'm definitely not interrupting. Just wanted to say James and I are extending our trip another week. The retreat is magical. You two keep taking care of each other." The call ended. Silence reclaimed the room. "Where were we?" Eleanor asked softly. But the moment had passed. Sebastian stood, putting careful distance between them. "You should rest. Dr. Chen comes early tomorrow." "Sebastian." "Good night, Eleanor." He retreated to his bedroom, and she heard the lock click. Eleanor stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying every word. His confession, his fear, the almost kiss that still tingled on her lips, though it had never happened. They were circling something inevitable. She could feel it in her bones. But Sebastian Clarke didn't do inevitable. He did control, calculation, careful distance. If she wanted him, she would have to be brave enough for both of them. The question was she? The days following Sebastian's confession existed in a strange limbo. Too much had been said to pretend nothing had changed, yet not enough had been resolved to move forward. They orbited each other carefully, polite, restrained. The sarcasm softened into something gentler, more dangerous. Every accidental touch sent electricity crackling through Eleanor's nervous system. Dr. Chen noticed immediately. "The tension in this flat could power a small city," she observed during Eleanor's morning session. "I take it something happened?" "Nothing happened." Dr. Chen manipulated Eleanor's ankle with practiced hands. "That's often worse than something. At least something can be addressed. Nothing just festers." Eleanor didn't have a response to that. The following week, Dr. Chen announced that Eleanor was ready for more advanced exercises, movements that required assistance and specialized equipment. "Mr. Clark can help with some of these at home," she said, demonstrating a series of stretches. "It's important to maintain consistency between our sessions." Sebastian, hovering in his customary doorway position, went very still. "I'm not qualified. It's simple range of motion work. I'll show you exactly what to do." Dr. Chen's smile was innocent. Too innocent. "Unless you'd prefer I arrange for one of my colleagues to make house calls. I have several excellent male therapists who—" "That won't be necessary." The words came out clipped. "Show me." Eleanor watched, half amused and half terrified, as Dr. Chen instructed Sebastian on proper hand placement and movement techniques. His attention was absolute, memorizing every detail with the intensity he probably brought to billion-pound business deals. "Excellent." Dr. Chen gathered her things. "Practice twice daily. I'll return Thursday to assess progress." She left them alone, and the flat suddenly felt very small. "We don't have to," Eleanor began. "The doctor recommended it." Sebastian knelt beside the sofa where she sat, his expression determinedly professional. "Shall we begin?" The first exercise was simple, gentle rotations of her ankle while he supported her calf. His hands were warm through the thin fabric of her leggings, his grip careful and sure. "Does this hurt?" "No." Her voice came out strangled. "You sound distressed." "I'm fine." He glanced up, caught her expression, and something flickered in his eyes. "Eleanor?" "Just keep going." The second exercise required him to hold her thigh, guiding her leg through a series of bends. Eleanor stared fixedly at the ceiling, willing herself not to combust. His thumb brushed the sensitive skin of her inner knee. She bit back a gasp. "Too much pressure?" His voice had dropped an octave. "No." "Perfect. Fine. Completely fine." She was not fine. She was dying. This was death by physiotherapy, and Dr. Chen had orchestrated it deliberately, the meddling genius. The third exercise was the worst. Sebastian positioned himself at her feet, both hands wrapped around her ankle, lifting and stretching in slow, controlled movements. From this angle she could see his bent head, the concentration furrowing his brow, the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders as he worked. One more repetition. His thumb traced absent circles on her ankle bone. "You're doing beautifully." The praise undid her. A small sound escaped her throat, not pain, something far more embarrassing. Sebastian's hands stilled. He looked up, the moment suspended between them like held breath. His eyes were dark, pupils blown wide. His lips parted slightly. Very slowly, never breaking eye contact, he lifted her foot and pressed his lips to her ankle, right where the injury had been. Eleanor's heart stopped beating entirely. "Sebastian." His name emerged as barely a whisper. He set her leg down gently and moved up her body, hands braced on either side of her hips, face hovering inches from hers. She could count his eyelashes, see the rapid pulse jumping in his throat. "Tell me to stop." His voice was wrecked. "Tell me this is a terrible idea, and I'll walk away." "It's a terrible idea." "Eleanor, I didn't tell you to stop." His eyes fluttered closed. His forehead dropped to rest against hers. They breathed together, sharing air, trembling on the edge of something irrevocable. His phone rang. "You have got to be joking." The growl that escaped him was almost feral. "Don't answer it." "It's the office. We're in the middle of a merger." He pulled back and she actually whimpered at the loss. "I'm sorry, I have to—" "Go." She waved him off, trying to compose herself. "Save the merger. Make millions. Buy another pretentious tie." His laugh was breathless, broken. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. quick, desperate, and retreated to his study. Eleanor lay boneless on the sofa, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she would survive these exercises twice daily until Thursday. She suspected not. Later that evening, after a conference call that had clearly tested Sebastian's patience, he found her in the kitchen, attempting to make tea one-handed while balancing on her good foot. "What are you doing?" He crossed the room in 3 strides, steadying her with hands on her waist. "You'll hurt yourself." "I wanted tea. You were busy." "I'm never too busy for—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "Let me." He lifted her onto the counter like she weighed nothing, positioning her safely before preparing the tea himself. She watched him move through his kitchen, this powerful man who ran an empire, making her tea with too much sugar because he'd memorized how she liked it. "The doctor said I'm healing well," she said softly. "A few more weeks and I should be able to manage on my own." Sebastian's hands paused on the kettle. "Manage on your own," he repeated flatly. "Go back to my flat, my life. Stop imposing on your hospitality." He turned, and the look on his face made her breath catch. "You think you're an imposition? Sebastian, you're the best thing that's ever happened to this flat." The words came out fierce, almost angry. "To my life. And if you think I'm counting down the days until you leave, you're the most foolish, brilliant woman I've ever met." He handed her the tea, his fingers brushing hers deliberately. "Drink your tea, Eleanor. We'll discuss your departure if I'm ready to let you go." He walked away, leaving her clutching a warm mug and a heart full of terrifying hope. 3 weeks. That's how long Eleanor had lived in Sebastian Clarke's penthouse, breathing his air, wearing his spare robes, falling deeper into something she couldn't name. The morning her doctor pronounced her healed enough to return home should have been celebratory. Instead, she sat in the examination room feeling hollow, nodding mechanically as he explained continued exercises and follow-up appointments. "You've done remarkably well," the doctor said. "The physiotherapy was excellent. You'll have full mobility within a month." "Wonderful," she managed. "Thank you." Sebastian waited in the corridor, leaning against the wall with studied casualness. When she emerged, his eyes searched her face. "Good news. I'm cleared." She forced brightness into her voice. "I can go home. Finally stop cluttering up your guest room." Something shuddered in his expression. "Excellent. I'll have my driver take you whenever you're ready." The ride to collect her things was silent. Sebastian drove himself this time, hands tight on the steering wheel, jaw clenched. Eleanor watched the familiar streets pass and tried to convince herself this was what she wanted. Back at the penthouse, she packed slowly. Her clothes, neatly laundered by Mrs. Patterson. Her books, dog-eared from late-night reading. The small accumulation of belongings that had somehow made his sterile flat feel like home. Sebastian appeared in the doorway as she zipped her suitcase. "Eleanor!" His voice was strained. She turned. He looked wrecked, dark circles under his eyes, hair disheveled, tie loosened like he'd been tugging at it. "Stay." The word seemed pulled from him against his will. "Please, just 1 more week." "Sebastian, I can't keep—" "I know you can manage alone. I know you don't need me hovering and bringing tea and driving you to appointments." He stepped closer, then stopped, as if afraid to come nearer. "But this flat has never felt like home until you were in it. And the thought of you leaving—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "1 more week, that's all I'm asking." She should say no. She should establish boundaries, protect her heart, stop this slow slide into something that would devastate her when it ended. "Yes," she whispered instead. His exhale was ragged with relief. "Thank you." "Merci, my titi." Then Charlotte returned from her countryside retreat 3 days later, glowing with happiness and laden with suspiciously knowing smiles. Well, well. She stood in Sebastian's foyer, surveying the scene, her brother hovering protectively as Eleanor demonstrated her improved mobility. "Isn't this cozy?" "Charlotte." Sebastian's tone held warning. "Brother?" Her tone held delight. "You look different, less brooding, more human." She turned to Eleanor with a conspiratorial wink. "And you're still here, interesting." Sebastian insisted I stay until I'm fully recovered. I'm sure he did. Charlotte pulled Eleanor into a gentle hug. "Thank you for the updates while I was away, though I notice your texts became increasingly vague toward the end. Almost like you were hiding something. I have no idea what you mean." Charlotte's eyes sparkled. We'll discuss this later, privately, when my overprotective brother isn't glaring at me. I'm not glaring. You're absolutely glaring. Charlotte patted his cheek affectionately. Now, I'm hosting a dinner tomorrow night, a celebration of my return and Eleanor's recovery. You're both attending, no arguments. And the dinner, Eleanor realized too late, was a trap. Charlotte had invited 8 people, intimate enough for conversation, large enough for strategic seating arrangements. And seated directly beside Eleanor was Marcus Whitmore, a charming architect with kind eyes and an obvious interest in her. Charlotte mentioned you work in publishing, Marcus said, leaning close to be heard over the table's chatter. I've always been fascinated by that world. What drew you to it? Eleanor answered politely, hyper-aware of Sebastian across the table. He was engaged in conversation with Charlotte's friend Victoria, but his eyes kept drifting to Eleanor, to Marcus, to the way Marcus's hand occasionally brushed her arm when making a point. Each time their gazes met, Sebastian's expression darkened. You should see the library at the estate I'm restoring, Marcus continued. 18th century mahogany shelves, floor to ceiling. I'd love to get a professional opinion on how to display the collection. That sounds lovely. Perhaps we could arrange a visit. I could drive you out next weekend. Before Eleanor could respond, Sebastian's voice cut across the table. Eleanor is still recovering. Long drives aren't advisable. Marcus blinked. I wasn't aware you were her physician. I'm aware of her condition, which is more than can be said for someone who's known her for approximately 2 hours. The table went quiet. Charlotte hid a smile behind her wine glass. Sebastian. Eleanor's voice held warning. Eleanor. His held challenge. Marcus cleared his throat. I didn't mean to cause any... You didn't. Eleanor placed her hand on Marcus's arm deliberately, holding Sebastian's gaze. And I'd love to see the library, perhaps in a few weeks, when I'm more mobile. Sebastian's wineglass hit the table with enough force to splash Bordeaux on the white tablecloth. Excuse me. He stood, napkin hitting his plate. I need some air. He stalked toward the balcony, and Eleanor watched him go, her heart pounding. Charlotte leaned close. Go after him. Why should I? He's being impossible. He's being jealous. There's a difference. Charlotte squeezed her hand. Ellie, I love my brother, but he spent 39 years running from anything that matters. If you care about him, and I know you do, don't let him run from this. Eleanor looked at the balcony doors, then back at the table where Marcus sat looking confused and Charlotte sat looking hopeful. She stood. Excuse me. I need some air, too. The balcony was cold, February wind cutting through her burgundy wrap dress. Sebastian stood at the railing staring at nothing, shoulders rigid. That was unforgivably rude, she said. I know. Marcus is perfectly nice. I know. Then why... He spun to face her, and the raw pain in his expression stole her breath. Because I can't bear it. The words tore from him. Watching someone else make you smile, touch your arm, plan weekends at country estates. He laughed bitterly. I have no right to feel this way. You're not mine. You've made that abundantly clear. Sebastian, but God help me, Eleanor, I want you to be. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the moonlight reflected in his tortured eyes. I want you to be mine in a way that terrifies me, in a way I've never wanted anything. The world narrowed to just the two of them, suspended in the frozen air between what was and what could be. Then stop running, she whispered. Stop pushing me away and then pulling me back. Stop almost kissing me and pretending it didn't happen. Decide, Sebastian. Decide if I'm worth the risk. His answer was immediate, certain, devastating. You're worth everything. The balcony doors opened. Charlotte's voice, Dessert is served. Sebastian closed his eyes, a curse escaping him. Tomorrow, Eleanor said firmly. We finish this conversation tomorrow. She walked back inside, feeling his gaze burn into her back, knowing that everything was about to change. Tomorrow never came the way Eleanor expected. She woke to an empty penthouse and a note on the kitchen counter. Emergency at the office. Merger complications. Will return late. Late became midnight. Midnight became 1 in the morning. Eleanor paced the living room, her ankle protesting but her mind too restless to care. When Sebastian finally walked through the door at 1:30, he looked exhausted, defeated. He stopped short when he saw her waiting. You should be asleep. You said we'd talk tomorrow. It's technically tomorrow. Eleanor, he rubbed his face. It's been an impossible day. Can we just— No. She moved toward him, determination overriding caution. We can't just. We've been justing for 3 years. Almost talking, almost touching, almost everything. I'm done with almost. His jaw tightened. What do you want from me? The truth. All of it. Not fragments you hand out when your guard is down. She stood before him now, close enough to see the weariness in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. You said I was worth everything. Did you mean it, or was that just another almost? I meant it. The words came out rough, scraped raw. I've never meant anything more. Then why do you keep pulling away? Why do we keep dancing around this like we're both waiting for permission? He laughed bitterly. Because I'm terrified, Eleanor. Because every person I've ever loved has left, and the thought of you leaving— His voice cracked. I would rather have you at arm's length forever than close enough to destroy me when you go. Who says I'm going anywhere? Everyone goes, eventually. I'm not everyone. She reached up, pressed her palm to his chest, felt his heart hammering beneath expensive fabric. I'm the woman who's been pretending to hate you for 3 years because loving you felt impossible. I'm the woman who's lived in your home and worn your robes and let you bring me tea with too much sugar. I'm not going anywhere, Sebastian, unless you push me away. He stared at her hand on his chest like it was something miraculous and dangerous. You said I wasn't yours, he whispered. Because you hadn't asked me to be. His eyes lifted to hers. Something shifted in them, the walls crumbling, the fear giving way to something fiercer. And if I asked? Eleanor's heart was pounding so loudly she was certain he could hear it. Ask me and find out. The silence stretched between them, taut as a wire about to snap. Then Sebastian moved, faster than she expected, his hands cupping her face, tilting it upward. Be mine. His voice was ragged, desperate. God help me, Eleanor, be mine. Yes. The word had barely left her lips before his mouth found hers. The first kiss was nothing like she'd imagined and everything she'd craved. It began gentle, a question, a tentative exploration. His lips were warm, softer than she'd expected, trembling slightly against hers. She felt his restraint, the years of control holding him back even now. Then she made a sound, a small, wanting whimper, and his restraint shattered. He deepened the kiss with a groan that vibrated through her entire body. His hands slid from her face into her hair, tilting her head to find a better angle. She gasped, and he took advantage, his tongue sweeping against hers in a rhythm that made her knees buckle. He caught her, one arm wrapping around her waist, pulling her flush against him. She could feel every inch of him, the solid wall of his chest, the thundering of his heart, the way his body responded to her closeness. Her fingers clutched his shoulders, his collar, anything to anchor herself in the storm of sensation. Eleanor, he breathed her name against her lips like a benediction. I've wanted, so long. You have no idea. Show me. She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes, drowning in the intensity she found there. Stop telling me and show me. Something primal flickered in his gaze. Before she could react, he swept her into his arms, carefully, mindful of her ankle even now, and carried her through the darkened flat, not to the guest room, to his bedroom. He laid her on his bed like she was something precious, something fragile. The city lights filtered through the windows, painting shadows across his face as he hovered above her. Tell me to stop. His voice was strained with the effort of control. Tell me if this is too fast, if you need more time. She pulled him down to her, silencing him with another kiss. This one was slower, deeper, a conversation without words. His hands traced the outline of her body over her clothes, reverent, wondering, like he couldn't believe she was real. When his fingers found the zipper at her back, he paused. May I? The question, so gentle amid such intensity, made her eyes sting. Yes. He undressed her like unwrapping something sacred, pressing kisses to each inch of skin revealed. His lips traced her collarbone, the curve of her shoulder, the inside of her wrist. Every touch was worship, adoration made tangible. You're beautiful, he murmured against her stomach, and she believed him. In his hands, beneath his gaze, she felt beautiful in a way she never had before. When they finally came together, Eleanor felt tears slip down her temples. Not from sadness, from overwhelm. From the culmination of 3 years of longing, of pretending, of building walls that were finally gloriously demolished. Sebastian noticed immediately. He stilled, concern flooding his features. "Am I hurting you? Eleanor, tell me." "No." She pulled him closer, buried her face in his neck. "No, it's perfect. You're perfect. I didn't know it could feel like this." He held her through the tears, kissed them from her cheeks, whispered promises against her skin. When they moved together again, it was with a tenderness that bordered on sacred. Afterward she lay in his arms, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slowly return to normal. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her back. "Stay," he said softly. "Not in the guest room, here, with me." "That's very forward, Mr. Clark. I believe we're past formalities, Miss Ashford." She felt his smile against her hair. "Though if you prefer, I could return to returning books that don't belong to you." She laughed, tilting her face up to meet his eyes. In the dim light, he looked younger, happier. The perpetual tension in his features smoothed away. "I'll stay." He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. "Sleep now. Tomorrow we can figure out what comes next." She drifted off in his arms, more content than she could remember being in years. She didn't see the way his expression shifted as she slept, the fear creeping back in, the old ghosts whispering warnings. She didn't feel him slip out of bed at dawn, retreating to his study, already building walls against the vulnerability of the night. Some battles, it seemed, couldn't be won in a single night. Eleanor woke to cold sheets and an empty bed. For a moment, she lay still, disoriented. The events of last night filtered back slowly. Sebastian's kiss, his touch, the way he'd held her like she was everything precious in the world. She reached for him instinctively, found only cool cotton. The bedroom was silent. Grey morning light filtered through the windows, painting the space in muted tones. His robe hung on the back of the door. His watch sat on the nightstand. But Sebastian himself was nowhere to be found. She rose, wrapped herself in his discarded shirt. It smelled like him, sandalwood and something uniquely Sebastian, and padded through the flat on careful feet. She found him in the kitchen, dressed in a fresh suit, standing before the coffee maker with his back to her. Every line of his body screamed tension. "Good morning." She kept her voice soft, hopeful. He turned. The man looking back at her was not the man who had whispered promises against her skin mere hours ago. This was Sebastian Clark, CEO, controlled, distant, his expression arranged in careful neutrality. "Good morning, there's coffee if you'd like some." The formality struck her like a physical blow. "Sebastian, is everything—" "I have early meetings." He checked his watch, not meeting her eyes. "Mrs. Patterson will be here at 9 if you need anything. I'll likely be late tonight." Eleanor felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Are we going to talk about last night?" A muscle ticked in his jaw. "What's there to discuss?" "What's there to—" She stared at him, incredulous. "You told me to be yours. You carried me to your bed. You—" Her voice caught. "Did that mean nothing to you?" Finally, he looked at her. Really looked, and what she saw in his eyes made her want to weep. Fear. Pure, devastating fear. "It meant everything," he said quietly. "That's the problem. I don't understand." He set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. "Last night was when I lost control. I let myself want something I have no business wanting." "Me?" The word came out flat. "You have no business wanting me. I have no business needing anyone the way I—" He stopped, shook his head. "This was a mistake. We got caught up in proximity and tension, and I took advantage." "You didn't take advantage of anything." Anger sparked through the hurt. "I was there too, Sebastian. I made choices. I wanted— You shouldn't want me." His voice rose raw and anguished. "I'm not capable of this, of being what you deserve. I'll disappoint you or drive you away, and then—" He pressed his palms to his eyes. "I can't survive losing you. The only way to prevent that is to never truly have you." Eleanor felt her heart crack down the middle. "So what?" she whispered. "We pretend last night didn't happen? Go back to sarcasm and borrowed books? It's better this way." "For whom?" He didn't answer. Couldn't, perhaps. Eleanor straightened her spine, calling on every ounce of resilience she possessed. "Fine, if that's what you want. It's not what I want. It's what's necessary." Then I'll make it easier for you. She moved toward the guest room, her voice steady even as everything inside her shattered. I'll pack my things. My ankle is healed enough. There's no reason for me to stay. Eleanor? No. She turned at the doorway and let him see the tears she couldn't hide. You don't get to push me away and still keep me close. That's not how this works. If you're choosing fear over me, then choose it fully. Let me go. She disappeared into the guest room before he could respond. When she emerged 20 minutes later, suitcase in hand, he was gone. The taxi ride to her flat was silent. London passed in a blur of grey streets and greyer skies. Eleanor stared out the window and felt nothing. Deliberately, carefully, nothing. If she let herself feel, she would fall apart. Her flat was exactly as she'd left it, small, cozy, achingly empty. She dropped her suitcase by the door and sank onto her sofa, finally allowing the tears to come. How had everything gone so wrong so quickly? She'd done what Charlotte said. She'd been brave. She'd told him how she felt, let him see her completely, given herself to him without reservation, and he'd retreated anyway. The days that followed were a special kind of torture. Eleanor returned to work, threw herself into manuscripts and meetings, smiled until her face ached. Her colleagues commented on how well she'd recovered. They didn't notice that the light had gone out of her eyes. Charlotte called, full of excited questions about the dinner party and its aftermath. Ellie, what happened? Sebastian won't tell me anything and you've been dodging my calls. Nothing happened. That's not what Marcus Whitmore thinks. He said Sebastian looked ready to commit actual violence over the library invitation. Eleanor closed her eyes. It doesn't matter. Whatever was between us, it's over. Over? But you were living together. I thought for certain. Charlotte, please. Her voice cracked. I can't. Not right now. The silence on the other end was heavy with understanding. Oh, Ellie, what did my idiot brother do? He made a choice. Eleanor wiped her cheeks roughly. And it wasn't me. Across the city, Sebastian Clark was discovering that choosing fear was no protection at all. He went through the motions of his days, meetings, calls, endless decisions that meant nothing. His penthouse had returned to its pristine, lifeless state. Mrs. Patterson had removed every trace of Eleanor. The lavender-scented candles she'd bought, the extra pillows, the worn paperback on the nightstand. He should have felt relieved. Instead, he felt hollowed out. Charlotte cornered him at a family dinner, furious and protective. What did you do? I protected her. From what? From me. Charlotte stared at him, then shook her head slowly. You absolute fool. You magnificent, terrified fool. She gripped his arm. She loves you, and you love her. And you're going to lose her forever if you don't fix this. She's better off. She's miserable. I've never seen her like this, Sebastian, not in 10 years of friendship. Charlotte's eyes glistened. You finally found someone worth the risk. Don't let fear win, please. She left him standing alone, her words echoing in the empty space where his certainty used to be. 2 weeks. 2 weeks of silence, of distance, of telling himself he'd made the right choice. 2 weeks of lying awake at 3 in the morning, reaching for a woman who wasn't there, drowning in the memory of how she'd felt in his arms. 2 weeks of slow, agonizing realization that protecting his heart meant losing the only person who had ever made it beat properly. Something had to change. The question was whether he was brave enough to change it. Charlotte appeared at Eleanor's door on a rainy Thursday evening, armed with wine, chocolate, and determination. I'm not taking no for an answer. She pushed past Eleanor into the flat. You've been dodging me for 2 weeks. That ends now. Charlotte, I really don't want to. I know you don't. That's why I'm here. Charlotte deposited her offerings on the coffee table and turned to face her friend. Sit, drink, and then you're going to tell me everything, and I'm going to tell you things about my brother that might change how you see the situation. Eleanor sank onto the sofa, exhaustion overwhelming her resistance. There's nothing to tell. We got close. He pulled away. End of story. That is a pathetically abbreviated version of what I suspect actually happened. Charlotte poured 2 generous glasses of wine. Did you sleep with him? Charlotte? I'll take that as a yes. Charlotte handed her a glass. And then he panicked and pushed you away. Eleanor took a long drink instead of answering. I knew it. Charlotte shook her head. He's such an idiot. A brilliant, terrified, emotionally constipated idiot. She settled beside Eleanor, her expression softening. Has he ever told you about our mother? Mrs. Patterson mentioned she left when you were children. Left is a gentle word for what she did. Charlotte stared into her wine. I was 8. Sebastian was 12. One morning she was there, making breakfast, complaining about the weather. That afternoon, she was gone. No warning, no goodbye. Just a note saying she'd made a mistake. That marriage, motherhood, all of it had been a mistake she couldn't continue. Eleanor's heart clenched. Charlotte, I'm so sorry. Father fell apart, drank himself into oblivion for years until he finally pulled himself together for our sakes. But Sebastian, Charlotte's voice thickened. Sebastian became the man of the house overnight. 12 years old, making sure I ate breakfast, did my homework, got to school on time. He raised me, Ellie. While our father drowned in grief, my brother became both parents. The image of a young Sebastian, serious, responsible, shouldering burdens no child should bear, made Eleanor's eyes sting. He learned a terrible lesson that day, Charlotte continued, that loving someone gives them power to devastate you, that needing people makes you vulnerable. He built walls so high that even I can barely see over them sometimes. She reached for Eleanor's hand. But with you, Ellie, I've watched my brother for 3 years. The excuses to see you, the way he lights up when he's sparring with you, the absolute terror in his eyes whenever another man shows interest. He's been in love with you since the moment you told him his tie was pretentious. Eleanor laughed wetly. It really was a pretentious tie. It absolutely was. Charlotte squeezed her hand. The point is, he's not pushing you away because he doesn't care. He's pushing you away because he cares too much. Because you've gotten past every wall he's built, and that terrifies him more than anything. So what am I supposed to do? Eleanor set down her wine, frustration bubbling up. I told him how I felt. I gave him everything, and he still chose fear. He chose what he knows, what's familiar, safety over risk. Charlotte leaned forward intently. But that doesn't mean he can't choose differently. It just means someone needs to show him that he can. I already tried. You tried once. When he was panicking and not thinking clearly. Charlotte's eyes sparkled with something that looked suspiciously like scheming. My brother is stubborn. It's a family trait. But he's also desperately, miserably in love with you. I've seen him, Ellie. He's a wreck. He hasn't slept properly in weeks. He nearly bit the head off a junior analyst for bringing him the wrong coffee. That sounds like normal, Sebastian. This was decaf instead of regular. A firing offense in his current state, apparently. Charlotte smiled. He's suffering, which means he's finally feeling the consequences of his choice. And I hope, that means he might be ready to make a different one. Eleanor stared at her friend, hope warring with self-protection. What if I go to him and he pushes me away again? Then at least you'll know you tried. Really tried. Charlotte's expression grew serious. I know my brother hurt you. I know this feels like a risk. But Ellie, isn't he worth it? Isn't what you felt together worth fighting for? The memories flooded back. Sebastian holding her hand through pain. Sebastian kissing her ankle with devastating tenderness. Sebastian whispering, "Be mine," like it was the most important request of his life. Yes, she whispered. He's worth it. Charlotte grinned. Then finish your wine, get some sleep, and tomorrow you're going to storm his penthouse and knock some sense into that beautiful, stupid head of his. Eleanor barely slept that night. She rehearsed speeches in her head, imagined scenarios ranging from triumphant reconciliation to humiliating rejection. By morning, she'd worked herself into such a state that she nearly talked herself out of going at all. But then she remembered the look in Sebastian's eyes when he'd told her she was worth everything, the tremble in his hands when he'd carried her to bed, the way he'd held her afterward like she might vanish if he let go. That man was still in there, buried under 39 years of fear and self-protection, and she was going to dig him out if it was the last thing she did. She dressed carefully, not for seduction, but for battle. Practical boots that would support her still tender ankle. Her favorite emerald coat that made her feel brave, hair pulled back from her face so he could see every emotion in her eyes. The taxi ride to his building felt endless. She stood in the lobby, heart pounding, finger hovering over the intercom for his penthouse. What if he refused to let her up? What if he'd already moved on? What if Charlotte was wrong, and he'd simply decided she wasn't worth the risk after all? "Stop it," she muttered to herself. "You're Eleanor Ashford. You've survived worse than one emotionally stunted billionaire." She pressed the buzzer. Silence. Then, crackling through the speaker, a voice that made her chest ache. "Yes? It's me." She paused, suddenly uncertain. "It's Eleanor." A long-waited pause. She could almost hear him debating whether to let her in or pretend he wasn't home. Then the door clicked open. Eleanor squared her shoulders, stepped into the elevator, and prepared to fight for the man she loved. Sebastian stood in the center of his living room, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His hair was disheveled, stubble darkening his jaw, shirt untucked and wrinkled. Gone was the polished billionaire who controlled empires with a glance. In his place stood a man unraveling at the seams. The door closed behind Eleanor with a soft click. Neither moved. "You came." His voice was rough, unused. "You let me up." She stayed by the door, needing the distance to gather her courage. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't." He laughed bitterly. "I've been standing here for 2 weeks telling myself I did the right thing. That pushing you away protected both of us, that the pain would fade eventually." "Has it?" "No." The word cracked. "It's gotten worse. Every day, every hour. I reach for you in my sleep. I hear your voice in empty rooms. I've burned through 3 coffee makers because I keep forgetting to turn them off while I'm busy remembering the way you laugh." Eleanor's heart stuttered. 3 coffee makers. Mrs. Patterson has threatened to quit. A ghost of his old humor flickered through his exhaustion. "Apparently I've become unbearable, more unbearable than usual, which she assures me is quite an achievement." She took a careful step forward. "Sebastian, why did you push me away?" "The real reason. Not the fear, not the excuse, is the truth." He turned toward the window, presenting her with the rigid line of his back. "Charlotte told you about our mother." "Yes." "Then you know. You know that I watched love destroy my father. That I learned very young, that needing someone gives them the power to annihilate you." His reflection in the glass was haunted. "I was 12 when she left. 12, and suddenly responsible for everything. My sister's happiness, my father's survival, keeping our family from crumbling entirely. You were just a child. I wasn't allowed to be a child. Not after." He pressed his palm against the window. "I built walls, Eleanor. Layers and layers of them. I convinced myself that if I never needed anyone, I could never be hurt like that again. And then I came along." He turned to face her, and the raw vulnerability in his expression stole her breath. "And then you came along," he repeated quietly, "with your sharp tongue and your knowing eyes and your complete refusal to be impressed by anything about me. You saw through every wall I'd built. You made me laugh. You made me feel things I'd spent decades learning to suppress. Is that so terrible? It's terrifying." He moved toward her, stopping just out of reach. "Because the more I felt for you, the more power you had to destroy me. That night, our night, I held you while you slept, and I realized that losing you would be worse than anything my mother's leaving ever was. Because I chose you, I opened myself to you willingly. So you decided to lose me on your own terms instead. I thought it would hurt less." His laugh was broken. "I was spectacularly wrong." Eleanor closed the remaining distance between them. She reached up, cupped his face in her hands, forced him to meet her eyes. "I'm not your mother, Sebastian. I'm not going to leave a note and vanish because things got difficult. That's not who I am. I know—" "No, let me finish." She held his gaze fiercely. "I have spent 3 years pretending to hate you because loving you felt impossible. I have watched you walk into rooms and felt my heart stop. I have argued with you and laughed with you and lived in your home and let you see me at my most vulnerable. And not once, not for a single moment, have I wanted to be anywhere else." His hands came up to cover hers, his eyes glistening. "I'm not asking you to stop being afraid," she continued, her voice thick with emotion. "Fear doesn't just disappear because we want it to. I'm asking you to be brave anyway, to choose me even when it's terrifying, to trust that I will still be here tomorrow and the day after and the day after that." Eleanor. Her name was a prayer on his lips. "I love you, Sebastian Clark. I love your arrogance and your vulnerability and your ridiculous pretentious ties. I love the way you make me tea with too much sugar because you remembered. I love the man who carried me to bed and held my hand through pain and hired a female physiotherapist because you couldn't bear another man touching me." A wet laugh escaped him. "You knew about that? Dr. Chen told me the first day." She smiled through her own tears. "I thought it was the most romantic thing anyone had ever done for me. It was jealousy. It was love. You just weren't ready to call it that." He pulled her hands from his face, but only to draw her closer. His arms wrapped around her, tight and desperate. "I'm still afraid," he whispered against her hair. "I don't know if that will ever fully go away." "I know. But being without you is worse. Every day apart has been worse than anything I've ever experienced." He pulled back enough to look at her, his eyes fierce and certain. "I love you, Eleanor Ashford. I've loved you since you told me my tie was pretentious. I was just too much of a coward to admit it. And now I'm choosing you." He cradled her face in his hands, thumbs wiping away her tears. "Now I'm asking you to come home. Not as a guest, not as my sister's friend, but as the woman I love. The woman I want to spend the rest of my life arguing with and making laugh and waking up next to every morning." "That sounds suspiciously like a proposal, Mr. Clark." His smile was slow, transforming his exhausted face into something radiant. "Consider it a preview. I intend to do it properly, with a ring and a speech, and possibly embarrassing public gestures. I hate public gestures." "I know." "That's what will make it entertaining." She laughed, and he caught the sound with his lips. This kiss was different from their first. That had been desperation and years of longing finally unleashed. This was a promise, tender and deep and achingly sweet. His mouth moved over hers with reverence, his hands cradling her like something precious. She melted into him, feeling the last of her doubts dissolve. When they finally broke apart, breathless and trembling, his forehead rested against hers. "Stay," he murmured. "Please, I don't want to spend another night without you. I'll need to get my things from my flat. Tomorrow, or next week, or never." He kissed her nose, her cheeks, the corners of her eyes. "I'll buy you new things. I'll buy you an entire wardrobe, just don't leave tonight." "That's very presumptuous." "I prefer confident." Eleanor laughed, joy bubbling up from somewhere deep inside her. "Fine, but I'm taking the good side of the bed." "There is no good side." "There is now. It's whichever side I choose." He swept her into his arms, carefully, always careful with her, and carried her toward the bedroom she'd left 2 weeks ago, thinking she'd never return. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I'm going to keep saying it until you're thoroughly sick of hearing it." "I don't think that's possible." "Then I'll just have to keep trying." He kissed her again, and this time, neither of them let go. 3.5 months had passed since the accident that changed everything. Eleanor stood at the window of Sebastian's penthouse, their penthouse now, she had to keep reminding herself, watching the Thames glitter beneath the spring sunshine. Her ankle had healed completely, leaving only the faintest twinge when the weather turned cold. A small price to pay for everything that fall had given her. "You're brooding." Sebastian's arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin settling on her shoulder. "That's my job. I'm not brooding. I'm contemplating." "Contemplating what?" "How strange life is." She leaned back into his warmth. 3 months ago, I was lying in a hospital bed, terrified and alone. Now I'm living in a penthouse with a man I spent 3 years pretending to hate. To be fair, I was exceptionally hateable. He pressed a kiss to her neck, just below her ear. "All those pretentious ties and arrogant comments. You're still arrogant, but you love me anyway." "Unfortunately, yes." He turned her in his arms, and she was struck, as she always was, by how different he looked now. The perpetual tension had eased from his shoulders. The guardedness in his eyes had softened into something warm and open. He smiled more, real smiles that reached his eyes and made her heart stutter. "I have something planned for tonight," he said, attempting casual and failing magnificently. "Charlotte is insisting we join her and James for dinner at that new restaurant in Mayfair, the one that requires reservations 6 months in advance. I may have pulled some strings." "Of course you did." She rose on her toes to kiss him. "What's the occasion?" "Does there need to be an occasion?" "With you?" "Usually, yes." He laughed, and the sound still thrilled her. This man who had spent so long guarding every emotion now laughing freely in their kitchen on a Tuesday morning. "Just be ready by 7, he said, and wear something special. The restaurant was everything Eleanor expected, elegant without being stuffy, intimate without being cramped. Charlotte and James were already seated when they arrived, Charlotte practically vibrating with barely contained excitement. "You look beautiful." Charlotte leaped up to embrace her. "That color is stunning on you." Eleanor glanced down at her dress, a deep burgundy silk that Sebastian had presented her with that afternoon, claiming he'd happened upon it while passing a boutique. The man who ran a billion-pound investment firm and scheduled every minute of his day had apparently just happened upon a designer dress in her exact size. She didn't believe him for a second. Dinner was lovely. 4 courses of exquisite food, flowing conversation, the easy warmth of people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. James regaled them with stories from his latest composition project. Charlotte shared gossip from her interior design firm. Sebastian kept one hand on Eleanor's knee beneath the table, his thumb tracing absent patterns that made it difficult to concentrate on anything else. After dessert, Charlotte suddenly stood. "James and I are going to check out the garden terrace. I heard it's spectacular at night." "Now?" Eleanor frowned. "But we haven't finished our wine. We'll be back." Charlotte was already dragging James toward the door, shooting Sebastian a meaningful look over her shoulder. The moment they disappeared, the restaurant's string quartet began playing something soft and romantic. The lighting dimmed subtly, and Sebastian reached into his jacket pocket. "Oh," Eleanor breathed. He slid from his chair, one knee touching the polished floor, and opened a small velvet box. The ring inside caught the candlelight, a vintage oval diamond surrounded by smaller stones, elegant and unusual and absolutely perfect. "Eleanor Ashford." His voice was steady, but she could see his hands trembling slightly. "You told me once that I was worth everything. I've spent 3.5 months trying to figure out how to tell you that you're worth infinitely more." "Sebastian, let me finish. I've been practicing this speech for weeks, and if you interrupt me, I'll lose my nerve entirely." He took a breath. "You transformed my house into a home. You turned my fear into courage. You saw through every wall I built, and loved what you found on the other side, even when I was convinced there was nothing worth loving." Tears were streaming down her face now, and she didn't care. "I want to spend the rest of my life arguing with you over the proper amount of sugar in tea. I want to watch terrible reality television while you laugh at my complaints. I want to grow old with you, Eleanor. I want to be the man who brings you tea every morning and holds your hand every night." He held up the ring, his grey eyes bright with emotion. "Will you marry me?" "Yes." The word came out as a sob. "Yes. Absolutely yes. You impossible, wonderful man." He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Of course it did, he would have planned for that too. Then he was on his feet, pulling her into his arms, kissing her with all the passion and tenderness that had been building between them for years. The restaurant erupted in applause. Charlotte burst back through the door, shrieking with joy. James was laughing and clapping. The string quartet shifted into something celebratory, but Eleanor barely noticed any of it. She was too busy drowning in Sebastian's eyes, in the promise of forever written there. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I love you too." She pulled back, grinning through her tears. "Even your pretentious ties. I'll have you know, I'm wearing a very reasonable tie tonight. It probably cost more than my monthly salary. Only twice your monthly salary. I'm reforming." She laughed, and he caught the sound with another kiss. Charlotte was already on the phone, presumably telling everyone she knew. James was ordering champagne. The other diners had returned to their meals, but several were still casting fond glances their way. Eleanor looked at the ring on her finger, at the man who had placed it there, at the new life stretching out before them, 3 years of pretending to hate him, weeks of living in his home. One night that had changed everything, followed by a painful separation that had almost destroyed them both. All of it had led here, to this moment, to yes. She had never been happier to fall down a staircase in her entire life. 8 months of marriage, 5 months of pregnancy, and Sebastian Clarke had somehow become even more insufferably overprotective than Eleanor had thought possible. "You need to elevate your feet," he announced, appearing in the living room with an array of pillows. "Dr. Harrison said swelling is normal, but elevation helps. My feet are fine. Your feet are slightly puffy. I noticed this morning." He was already arranging pillows on the ottoman, his expression brooking no argument. Sit, elevate, now. You're worse than when I had the ankle fracture. You weren't carrying my child when you had the ankle fracture. He guided her gently onto the sofa, lifting her feet with exquisite care. Now you're growing an entire human being. The level of caution required has increased exponentially. Eleanor settled into the cushions, too comfortable to argue. The penthouse had transformed over the past months, soft throws draped over furniture, books scattered on every surface, a growing collection of baby items beginning to accumulate in what would become the nursery. It looked lived in, loved in. Sebastian knelt at her feet, and she watched with fond exasperation as he began to massage her ankles. "You know," she mused, "there's a certain irony in you rubbing my feet every night when it was a foot injury that brought us together. I prefer to think of it as narrative symmetry." His thumbs worked magic on her arches. "Also, you make the most delightful sounds when I find the right spot. I do not make sounds. You absolutely do. Little sighs of contentment. They're very gratifying to my ego." She threw a cushion at his head. He caught it without pausing his ministrations. This was their life now. Easy banter, casual touches, a comfort so deep it felt like breathing. The walls Sebastian had spent decades building had crumbled entirely. In their place was a man who left her love notes in her briefcase, who consulted with Charlotte weekly about pregnancy milestones, who had already interviewed 17 potential nannies because he refused to trust their child to anyone but the absolute best. "Charlotte called," Eleanor mentioned. "She wants to throw us a baby shower next month." "Absolutely not. She said you'd say that. Because she knows me. I will not have my pregnant wife subjected to ridiculous games involving melted chocolate in nappies." Eleanor laughed. "Is that what happens at baby showers?" "I have no idea. I Googled it and I was appalled." He finished with her feet and shifted up to sit beside her, one hand settling naturally on the swell of her belly. "We could have a small gathering instead. Intimate. Dignified, no melted chocolate. Charlotte will be devastated. Charlotte will survive." He leaned down, pressing his lips to her stomach. "Hello in there, little one. Your Aunt Charlotte wants to throw a party involving confectionery and infant hygiene products. I'm protecting you already." The baby kicked against his hand, and Sebastian's face transformed into something so purely joyful that Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. Pregnancy hormones, she told herself, though she suspected it was simply love. "She's active tonight," Sebastian murmured, splaying his fingers across her belly to feel more movement. "Must take after her mother." Or his father. "You're not exactly sedentary. We could find out the sex. Dr. Harrison offered—" "I want to be surprised." Eleanor covered his hand with hers. "We've had enough surprises in this relationship. One more won't hurt." He looked up at her, and even after 8 months of marriage, the depth of emotion in his eyes still stole her breath. "I never thanked you properly," he said quietly. "For what?" "For coming back, after I pushed you away." He shifted closer, cradling her face with his free hand. "I was so convinced I was protecting both of us. I nearly destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. You were scared. We both were. You were brave anyway. You showed up at my door when I'd given you every reason to walk away. You fought for us when I was too terrified to fight for myself." Eleanor turned her face, pressed a kiss to his palm. "You were worth fighting for. So are you." He kissed her, soft, reverent, achingly tender. "So is this. Our life, our family, everything we're building together." "You've gone soft, Mr. Clark." She smiled against his lips. "What would your board of directors think?" His answering smile was slow, dangerous, utterly delicious. He leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "My board of directors can go hang themselves. I have far more important concerns now." His hand stroked gentle circles on her belly, like ensuring my wife has everything she needs. "Speaking of which, cravings. I could murder a strawberry milkshake from that place in Covent Garden, with extra whipped cream." He was already reaching for his phone. "Done anything else? Those little pastries from the French bakery. The ones we had on our honeymoon? You remember that?" "I remember everything about our honeymoon." His voice dropped meaningfully. "Every single detail." Heat flooded her cheeks. "Sebastian." "Eleanor." He mimicked her tone perfectly, then grinned. "Milkshake and pastries. I'll have them delivered within the hour. This man, this impossible, arrogant, utterly devoted man. He'd transformed from someone who avoided emotion like a contagion into a husband who anticipated her every need, massaged her feet nightly, and kissed her belly each morning as if greeting an old friend. "I love you," she said, because the words still felt like a miracle. "I love you too." He pulled her close, careful of her belly, tucking her against his side. "Both of you. More than I ever knew I could love anything." They sat together in the gathering dusk, watching the city lights flicker to life beyond their windows. The Thames caught the last rays of sunset, turning briefly to gold before settling into silver. Somewhere in the flat, Eleanor's phone buzzed with messages. Charlotte planning, Mrs. Patterson checking in, colleagues from Pemberton sending congratulations on her maternity leave. Life continued, busy and full and wonderfully ordinary. But in this moment, there was only this. Sebastian's heartbeat beneath her ear, their child growing steadily between them, the improbable, incredible love that had grown from years of verbal combat and one unfortunate tumble down a staircase. "You know," Sebastian said thoughtfully, "I should send that staircase a thank you note." Eleanor laughed. "That's the most ridiculous thing you've ever said." "I'm entirely serious. Without that staircase, you'd never have needed rescuing. I'd never have had an excuse to keep you. We might still be circling each other, pretending to hate what we actually couldn't live without. You could have just asked me to dinner like a normal person. Normal is overrated." He kissed her hair. "I prefer our story. Enemies to lovers, with a medical emergency and a jealous physiotherapist situation thrown in for drama. You're the only one who was jealous about the physiotherapist. Dr. Chen was 62 years old, and yet you still paid her double to ensure no male colleagues covered her sessions. I have no regrets. Neither did Eleanor, not a single one." She snuggled deeper into his arms, feeling their baby kick contentedly, watching their future unfold through the window like a promise kept. Sometimes the greatest love stories started with hate, or what felt like hate before you understood it properly. Sometimes you had to fall before you could rise into something better. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, you found someone worth falling for. Leave your comment and share this story with someone special. It truly helps us keep bringing new stories to you. And if you want to follow every chapter of this emotional journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support makes all the difference.